Hello, folks, and welcome to another episode of the Texas Titans podcast. Thank you so much for listening. I have a really great episode today. This is a conversation that I had with Lieutenant Michael E. Thornton, a retired Navy SEAL and recipient of the Congressional Medal of Honor. In this conversation, I talked to Mike not only about what it means to have experienced such an incredible mission that ended up winning him the Congressional Medal of Honor, but also how he became the leader that he is, his philosophy on leadership, hard work, discipline, what it meant to be a Navy SEAL in the early days of the Navy SEAL program, as a matter of fact, and just what courage and commitment and valor mean to him. I mean, this is an incredible conversation. I think you're going to really enjoy it. And literally, Mike goes into every poignant detail of that mission that went awry, that caused him to end up rescuing and saving his commanding officer and dear friend Tommy, who you're going to hear referred to throughout the interview, which is referring to Lieutenant Tom Norris, who was also a special advisor that was on the mission with him and was leading the mission. So you're going to hear all the details of that. Also, I want to mention that if you want to hear or read more about Tom Norris and Mike Thornton in this heroic act of valor that both of them performed on this mission, you can do so by getting their book By Honor Bound. Incredible read. I highly recommend By Honor Bound. You can get that and read more about it. But here's a little bit of just who Mike Thornton is and why I think you're going to enjoy this conversation so much. Michael Edwin Thornton was born in Greenville, South Carolina, and raised on the family farm near Spartanburg. Thornton joined the Navy upon graduating from high school in 1967 and completed the rigorous training to join the SEALs, the Navy's elite sea, air, land special operations force. As overall American conventional forces were gradually withdrawn from Vietnam in the early 1970s, the unconventional warfare role of Navy SEALs grew. In the spring of 1972, Petty Officer Thornton was assigned to a mission under the command of Lieutenant Thomas Norris. Thornton and Norris accompanied a three-man South Vietnamese Navy team on an intelligence gathering mission in enemy-held territory. Launched from a Vietnamese Navy junk in a rubber boat, the patrol reached land and found themselves further behind enemy lines than they had planned. Continuing on foot toward their objective, they came under heavy fire from a far larger force and were in danger of being surrounded. While inflicting heavy casualties on the enemy, they headed for the shore in hopes of escaping by sea. On learning that Lieutenant Norris had been hit by enemy fire and was believed to be dead, Thornton returned through a hail of fire to the lieutenant's last position and found him severely wounded and unconscious, but alive. Quickly disposing of two enemy soldiers who approached at that moment, Thornton slung Norris over his shoulder and dashed for life over 400 yards of open beach, returning enemy fire as he ran. He carried Norris and other wounded comrade out to, he carried Norris and another wounded comrade out to sea, beyond the range of enemy fire. The company floated for approximately 2 hours before being retrieved by the South Vietnamese Navy. Close to a year after his heroics in Vietnam, on October 15, 1973, Michael Thornton received the Medal of Honor at the White House from President Richard Nixon. Lieutenant Norris, still a patient at nearby Bethesda Naval Hospital, had been forbidden by his doctors to go to the ceremony, but Thornton spirited him out of the back door, Thornton spirited him out of the back door of the facility and took him along. Almost 3 years later, Norris himself received the medal with Thornton looking on. Thornton is the first person in more than a century to receive that honor for saving the life of another Medal of Honor recipient. Now retired after a distinguished Navy career that continued through Operation Desert Storm, he resides near Houston, Texas. This is a phenomenal story that Mike goes into great detail to describe that mission and, again, his leadership style and what made him a true American hero. I think you all will enjoy this episode of the Texas Titans podcast. And literally, if there were a definition for a Texas Titan, even though he came by way of South Carolina, he's a Texan now by choice. Mike Thornton, by all accounts, is absolutely a Texas Titan. So please enjoy this episode. And once again, thanks so much for listening. Hey folks, this episode of the Texas Titans podcast is brought to you by Crown and Caliber. They are the smarter way to buy or sell a watch. They carry more than 40 brands including Rolex, Omega, Cartier, Breitling, and Panerai. Plus, with a full-time staff of watchmakers and refinishers, they make sure every watch that comes through their shop is authentic and working as the manufacturer intended. Every watch comes with a 1-year warranty and a hassle-free return policy. So, if it doesn't look or fit quite like you hoped, you can just send it back, and our listeners can get $150 off for their first purchase over $2,000 with the code TITAN150. Folks, I have been to their facilities. I have met their watchmakers. They are top-notch. This is a great organization. From the founder of the company all the way through, it's a great organization. If you are looking for a premium luxury watch to either buy or sell with a group that you can depend on to treat you right, Crown and Caliber, crownandcaliber.com. Check them out. Mike Thornton, how are you, sir?
Doing great, my friend, doing great.
Well, first of all, I got to tell you, I am so grateful for you taking the time to visit with me today. One of the things I mention on this podcast to all of my guests who have very, very big roles that they're in, time is the most important and critical non-renewable resource we have, and the fact that you're willing to share some of that with me today, I could not be more grateful. So thank you, sir.
Well, with the grace of God, I'm still here and I'm able to do this, and it's my pleasure and my honor to talk with this great audience and see if I can help them in any way I possibly can.
Well, let's just kind of tee this up by saying that, first of all, kind of like we mentioned before we came on, the podcast exists because I love to learn about those who have pursued excellence, that have had amazing leadership roles, that have done remarkable things throughout the course of their lives, and have most importantly exhibited strong leadership, of which you check all those boxes on a number of fronts. And, Navy SEAL, Congressional Medal of Honor, business leader, your foundation is doing remarkable things, author. I mean, where to dive in is kind of hard to pick. So what I'd like to do is just let's go right back to the very beginning of the Mike Thornton life, and just kind of tell me where it all started, where you're from, and just let's start there and just see where it goes.
Okay, sounds great. I was born in Greenville, South Carolina, and back in 1949, and as my father said, at the young age of 6 weeks, I crawled over to Spartanburg area up north near the foothills of the mountains, and my father was my greatest. I mean, he was a mentor that you can't understand. My dad only had a 6th grade education, but he had his own business, and he treated everybody with respect. I don't care what your color or race or no matter what it was, you worked for Ed Thornton, and everybody got treated the same, And I've asked guys that have been working with Daddy for 28 years, why do you still work for Daddy? Because he's fair, and he's a man that you looked up, and, he didn't talk a whole lot, but, man, when he spoke, it's like E.F. Hutton, you better be listening. Mm-hmm. And I had a great mother. She gave us love and faith in God, and I used to tell Daddy all the time I loved him, and he never. I finally got a hug out of him in 1969 when I came back from Vietnam. And I'd been wounded, and after that it kind of opened up. But for him to say he loved me one year, I fell off the. I was sitting at our house in California, and I fell off the bar stool when he said it. I said, "Holy crap, what's going on with this man?" So that's where I kind of got brought up. But, like I say, my father, he reeked of respect. Mm-hmm. I mean, you just saw the man and the way he treated everybody. And that's one reason where I am today, is because he is my greatest mentor of all time. I wished I listened to him a little earlier in my life. I didn't, but I learned from him for the rest of his life, which he lived to be 90 years old. Wow. I've lost him and my mom both, but they're still in my brain, my heart, and the making of who I am today.
Mike, it's amazing the impact that a father has on a son, and your story reminds me so much of one that my dad tells about my grandfather. very similar situation. My dad always talks about how whenever he was growing up, now one of the things that Papa, as he was called, one of the things that he would do whenever my dad would play football, if he scored a touchdown, he should have scored two. If he scored two, he should have scored three. So he's real hard on him. And one day they ended up going in together and buying a tire store in Sulphur Springs. And same situation. I mean, my dad had never received a hug or a proud of you. It just wasn't. It wasn't what happened. And one day, it was about I think it was a couple days before my grandfather passed away. He was about to leave the tire store, and he slapped my dad on the shoulder and said, "I'm proud of you." And to this day, my dad speaks of that moment like what you just said, falling off the bar stool. And it's amazing, the profound impact. But those guys were from a different era where it's almost like they didn't want you to let up, so therefore they weren't going to really show that emotion. And it's just, whenever you said that, it immediately spoke to me. Now, what line of work was your dad in? What kind of business did he have?
We did construction, basically, air conditioning. I learned how to weld when I was 10 years old. Used to do ornamental fences and stuff like that. Rock wool. At the age of 11, I was up in an attic, 160 degrees, blowing rock wool. And the hoses are probably about an 8-inch hose, and
Okay.
I looked like Smokey the Bear when I came out of it. You'd have sweating up there and all that. All that's back then, and he was, But the problem is, it wasn't the problem. The great thing is my father wouldn't do a job that he'd ask somebody else to do.
Yep.
So when we sat there one day and there's 6 inches of water underneath the house, and we had to get this house batted out, in other words, insulation, and Dad said, "I'll go in there." I said, "No, you won't." And I had about 3 other guys. They saw me go underneath that house, and you have that roll of bats sitting on your chest to keep them from getting wet, and you got those tiger teeth, and you're throwing them up in there, and I came out looking like I've been playing in the mud for about a week, and Daddy said, "Thanks, son." And I said, "No, thank you, Dad."
Wow.
So but like you said about your grandfather, that they were born up before the Depression.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, Daddy went to work at 11 years old in a cotton mill, and then your grandfather was probably brought
Absolutely.
up the same way.
Absolutely. Yeah, my granddad used to talk about just how amazing it was when they first had electricity. Whenever they out in the small community outside of Sulphur Springs where he grew up, when they all of a sudden didn't have to use oil lanterns to read by, I mean, that was a big deal. And so yeah, it was a different era. So working for your dad, you start to understand he's your mentor. You can see what leadership is like. Now, one other thing, how did he treat you? I think I know the answer to it, but how did he treat you in relation to his other employees?
The same. Actually, he was harder on me than he was his employees.
That's what I expected.
Yeah, he was harder on me, but he, as you were saying, he was trying to mold me into being a leader. I mean, and I learned a lot about leadership from my father.
Right. And so you go through high school, and what is high school? Are you an athlete, or what does that look like?
I was really a good swimmer. But I had dyslexia real bad, and I couldn't. I was very good in math. But if I had to read something and I had to train myself, and I'd like to tell all the young kids out there, dyslexia is something you can get through. And I never knew I had it until my son I knew he was studying very hard at the age of 12. And I had him tested, and I said, "What is this thing called dyslexia?" And there's several different ways of it as we've done studies on it now. And basically, you're very, very smart. Your brain's moving, but it doesn't take in it. So if I had to read a problem, but to figure out a problem, I was very good. If I had to read a problem, I was stunk because, and that's like the book I wrote. I've never read the book. I've watched it and listened to it on tape, but my wife's read it to me like 6 times, and I'd make the corrections because one thing about a person that has dyslexia, they have a great memory, and if they see it and hear it, they never forget it. And I think that's helped me a lot too growing up. So it's okay to have dyslexia. The way I explained it to my son, I said, so I had myself tested, and it comes from the male genes. And the way I explained it to my son, I said, "I know you're studying hard and you're doing well, and they have special schools, and it doesn't make you different than any other person." I said, "But we have wires to our brain." And I said, "If you have one loose wire, and we just have to train that wire to take care of you." And he went on to college and stuff. And I said, but your father, I do. And you're proud of me, aren't you? He said, yes, Daddy. And I said, I've got 5 loose wires. And I used it by using colored pencils, as you notice on my desk now. There's colored pencils all over the place. And I trained myself until I found out, and when he was 12 years old, that what I had is okay.
You know, it's interesting you say that. So there's a very, very successful guy in Tyler, a car dealer. He suffered from dyslexia, and then literally, I just did an interview last week with a dear friend of mine, very successful business guy, philanthropist, author. He has dyslexia, and one of the things that I can't remember what the actual statistics were, but of the Fortune 500 CEOs and a lot of very successful entrepreneurs, the number of those individuals, of high performers that have dyslexia they're almost outliers as a whole, because what people are finding is what you just said. A lot of dyslexics, the challenge causes them to have to work that much harder than everybody else, and it turns out to yield benefits to them as opposed to a detriment when they have that mindset. And it's really amazing how many people that are in extremely high performing roles, you'll find out that they had dyslexia. So I think that you kind of prove that hypothesis.
Well, I think what my father said, he always told me, never quit, never give up.
Amen.
And that helped me get through training. It helped me get where I am today. I don't even have a high school education, but I've after retiring out of the military and going all the way through the enlisted ranks and getting a commission and retiring with the other accolades. I don't think anybody goes to war for accolades or medals or nothing. It just happened. But if it was that never giving up, never is the reason why I'm still alive today. I've been wounded many times, and no matter how bad the outlook looked, I looked at the positive side.
Right.
We're still here. So I like to tell all those young guys out there and those kids that, just never give up, keep striving, set goals in your life. But when you set that goal and you achieve that goal, you set another goal. You just don't live on your own. So I've owned several businesses, and I started this great foundation. And Connie and I and my wife and some other great Americans like Bob Kerry, he used to be the governor, senator of Nebraska, and we keep striving to help the kids out there. We've given out over $500,000 in $5,000 and $10,000, $25,000 checks last year.
Wow.
And we're working hard to do this again every year with the grace of God. As long as he keeps letting me walking and moving and breathing, I'm going to keep doing what I'm doing as you're doing what you're doing, is try to better people's lives. And that's what my father always did.
Well, you touched on something that I want to get down into. I want to kind of dig into, because you talked about goal setting. And a lot of people talk about, well, you should set goals, achieve goals or whatever. But the methodology or the execution of setting and achieving those goals can be different for a number of people, how they set them, what they do. First of all, when did you start in your life of saying, okay, this is something I want to attain to, and I'm going to set a goal? And then when did that start to develop, and what does that look like both early on in your as a young man that you've carried through, because you are so accomplished and you have, and I know we're going to get into BUDS training and Hell Week and all of the things that it takes to become a Navy SEAL, and then being an author and what you've done with the Met Fund. But when did that start to take shape, and what does it look like for you to set and achieve goals? What's your methodology? Do you write them? Does it? How do you remind yourself, hold yourself accountable? What exactly is the methodology for you, Mike?
Well, me, I wanted to be like my father, and I watched, and by working with him all the time, and Daddy worked so hard. When I'd come home for 30 days as leave, if I didn't go work with my father, but I said I still want to use him as my mentor. And I said, he's done this, and I want to do this and better. And it's like going through, when I went through training, it's called Underwater Demolition Recruit Training. And we started off with 129 in my class, and we graduated with like 12. So, wow. But you never quit. That was the whole thing. And everybody thinks about quitting, but when you think about it, I said, what would Daddy think? And I always went back, looked at my father. I said, well, he never quit during World War II, and he never quit, with the 6th grade education. He never quit. He's provided for his family, and my father, he provided, he made everybody's life a better life. Not always his, but everybody else he made better. And that's what I wanted to do. I wanted, better my life.
Right. So you was having the vision of living up to his standards and beyond. That was
Yeah.
your drive.
That was it, and it continues to be even today.
Wow. So when did you decide, okay, because I know you basically went straight from, pre-high school, you went into the military very early,
Yeah.
right? So when did that start to take shape? When did you decide that you wanted to join the military and serve? And what was the decision process like that? And what was your dad's response to that?
Well, and he was very happy. Of course, it was in the hot time of Vietnam, and my mother wasn't too happy about it. But everybody in my family had served. My uncles had served. My father, my uncles on my mother's side had served. And so I knew. And then I saw this crazy movie, the Five Sutherland Brothers, and that's where. And they all died. They're all from Portland, Oregon. They all died trying to save each other. And I said, that's the way my family is. That's the way my father is. So I made up my mind to be a Navy guy. Then I saw this crazy movie, The Navy Frogman, with Richard Whitmore. And I was a very, very good swimmer. And because being a swimmer, you didn't have to have grades. You just had to swim. And my brother and I both swam in state meets and stuff like that. And I said, I can do that. But I only knew about UDT. I'll never when I went to underwater demolition recruit training. I went through training, and out of the 12, the top 10% went to SEAL team, and they said, "You'll be a Navy SEAL." Well, we just went through training. I didn't know what a SEAL was.
That's what I was going to ask you. Did you even know?
I didn't. Nobody even knew what a SEAL was back then. Of course, it's a little bit different now. But great friends of mine, and I was just with a couple of the guys, Hal Kirkendall and Mike Lacaze, and they're both just great guys, and kind of tickles me, some of these guys. I said, what class did you go through? He said, I don't remember. I tell you, if you ever been through BUD/S training or UDT training, you'll remember your damn class.
Right.
They kind of branded on your ass, type deal.
So tell me about that. So you make it through, and all of a sudden you realize not only did you want to be a soldier, it's in your family DNA, but you're pretty darn good at it. It fits your personality and your leadership skills. And then all of a sudden they come up with this thing called the Navy SEALs that you're one of the elites, so they want you to be there. What did that look like? Take me through? Because I know you go through. I guess you go through BUD/S, then it's Hell Week after that. And were they doing Hell Week back then?
Well, yeah, we were doing Hell Week, yes.
Okay.
So, but basically, Hell Week was about the 5th week of your week. They'd break you up. And what they did, they tore your body down.
Yeah.
I don't care how strong you were or how, I was a very good swimmer. I wasn't a bad runner, but I wasn't like some of the guys that could run.
Right.
I weighed about 210 when I went into training.
Right.
And I dropped quite a bit of weight and got back up. And they break your body down, then they rebuild it. Know, who should sit down and do 500 flutter kicks or do 1,000 jumping jacks? It's stupid. Now we look now some of the exercise they used to, duck walking with the damn boat on your head. And, well, now everybody wants to know whether they got back problems and knee problems and all these other problems.
Right.
And Stanford University medical team came down there in the 80s, and this is about a few years before I was getting ready to retire. Said, all this stuff is killing you guys. That's the reason you have all these older guys who got all these problems, and so they changed the outlook, Well, you used to say as the older guys said, well, he's not really a team guy. He can't duck walk with a boat and two people sitting in the damn thing,
Right.
But over the all, we have to believe in changes, and the changes have been good.
Right.
So basically, you got to be able to accept changes and get and do it. You can't just because that's the way it used to be.
Right.
Well, the weapon systems we got now, the SEALs we have now are much smarter than I was. But back then, I got everybody wanted to be with Mike Thornton,
Yeah.
and that's and I said I wanted to be the best SEAL I possibly could.
Right.
And I don't like to say I didn't go to war for medals and accolades. What I really wanted to do is have the respect of the people around me, and everybody. In my last tour to Vietnam, the reason I went, I didn't have to go back, but my CEO said, Mike, we're sending over these kids. They're brand new, never been in combat. I would like for you to go over and bring them back.
Wow.
And that's how Tommy and I got together. And, of course, everything else is history about getting the medal and everything else.
Right.
we brought everybody back, even Tommy, even though he had spent 6.5 years in a hospital.
Mm-hmm.
But everybody came back home alive, and that's to me, that's my award, because, and when I retired, you know, I only invited like 100 people, and they had over 1,800 people at my retirement. So that's as well, you know.
Well, I tell you what, there's something you said in there that I'm reading a book now called $1 Trillion Coach, and it was written by one of the former CEOs of Google about a gentleman. His last name's Campbell. I'm drawing a blank on his first name, but Bill Campbell maybe. But I'll probably have that wrong. I'll have it corrected in the show notes. But he was a college football coach. Then he goes out to Silicon Valley, makes a ton of money, does really well, but he loves coaching. He loves to teach, and he ends up being a performance coach to guys like John Chambers, the former chairman and CEO of Cisco, Steve Jobs. All these guys rely on his coaching. He never takes a penny, by the way. He made enough money before he did that. He just loved to coach and develop people. And he talks about how an executive came in to visit with him on a one-on-one one time, and he was complaining because he wasn't getting feedback from his senior managers. Like, I don't know how I'm doing. I don't know what my boss thinks of me, actually. And what Campbell told him, he said, you don't need to worry about what your boss thinks. You need to worry about what your peers think. What do your teammates think? And it sounds like to me you were that guy that realized that right away, is that it was more important to you what the guys that were actually doing the duck walks with the boat on you, what they thought of you, how they depended on you.
Yeah, and I agree with you 100%. You know, team is called team, and it means a thing, and you put your people before yourself, and that's what I've always done, is put my people before myself. I hate micromanagers,
right?
Because they don't know nothing. I know my strong points,
Mm-hmm.
but I know my weak points. That's the reason I have Connie and my wife and another team to run, as I told you, about our website and all that kind of stuff.
Yep.
But but then you have to say you're inferior in some ways. Well, inferior? What the hell's wrong? Everybody's inferior, you know.
Mm-hmm.
I don't see anybody around this world walking on damn water.
Right.
I mean, I've tried it, but it don't work.
Right.
And I tell you, that day in North Vietnam, if I could have walked on water, it'd have been a lot easier for me and Tommy, because I was a good runner back then. But you know, you have to admit to yourself.
Right.
And some people don't want to admit that they have a flaw or they have a problem.
Yeah.
And that's the reason I like to tell everybody, hey, it's okay to have dyslexia. It's okay to have this. It's okay not to be the greatest guy in the world. That's okay, you know, but be honest with yourself and be honest with your peers. I mean, if I got a problem, I'll let my wife know. I mean, there's some problems I don't like telling anybody about. In medical problems, I don't go around and tell everybody about my medical problems.
Right.
So, you know, they're my problems. But my wife needs to know, and Connie needs to know, because they're always there for me, just like my sister is. And so, I mean, you know, but to go out and want somebody to feel sorry for me, I said, good Lord, I'm 70-something years old. Hell, I'm the most blessed guy in the world. I've had a great life, and I've been wounded 100 times, and why am I here? Only the man above knows why I'm here. And then when he's ready to pull my plug, I'm ready to go. But he's given me a great time in my life to have a beautiful wife and children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren and great friends.
Right. Well, before and I could not agree with you more, because one of the things that, in a different setting, like in business, and whenever I talk to young people just starting their careers, and most of our greatest wisdom is learned from mistakes that we've made ourselves. And one of my biggest ones you just touched on. If not, I was always that guy that was afraid to ask a question because I didn't want to appear stupid. I already was inferior, in wherever I went. I didn't go to a big name undergrad school, and then I ended up at SMU for an MBA because I thought that would make me feel better and feel smarter. And it wasn't until then that I'm sitting in class and I don't want to ask questions, but then all these people who I assume everyone in there is a lot smarter than me, and they start asking questions, and a lot of them were the same questions I had. And what I realized that it took me, like I said, nearly 40 years to realize it, that to me, the most courageous thing you can do is ask the question, admit the weakness. You're never going to improve the weakness if you don't stand up and say, hey, this is a weakness. Magnify your strengths and hone those, but find those blind spots and correct them by first just letting people know. And I wish I knew who said the quote. That it's pretty profound right there. You said, know yourself. And the quote basically says, "Don't lie to yourself, and you're the easiest person to lie to." That's the way it goes. Now, one more question about the SEALs training, because I know you ad nauseum. Everybody's fascinated with the SEALs, and it is. I mean, because the things that you go through, the stories you hear, and then with the stories of Marcus Luttrell and guys like that. Now Dan Cranshaw that we talked about offline, and these guys that have gone on to do remarkable things. David Goggins, who I just got through finishing his book, and it was remarkable. But one of the things that Goggins said that I'd like to ask you about, even with your upbringing of hard work, installing the insulation, trying to please your dad, wanting to go above and beyond, going through BUD/S training, when you have to overcome things physically that, if just on the surface, if somebody put on a board, you're going to do this today, this today, this today. It's kind of like Roger Bannister the first time somebody said, you're going to have to run a 4-minute mile. Everybody at that time said it can't be done until Roger Bannister did it. What did it mean to you in your life going through that hellish training when all of a sudden you realized you could put your body through physical torment and survive and get through it? How did that change you, and how did that improve your execution going forward, and has it since?
Well, I think you're going through training. I don't look at the big picture. I don't worry about what's down the road.
Right.
I got to get down the road. So all I do is worry about what I got to do next. What is it going to take for me to get from this place to the next step or to the next step?
Right.
And so and that's life itself. I take life one day at a time, because it could change one day at a time. A lot of things you take one moment at a time, but you can't get to that next step until you finish this step. And that's, like I said, setting goals.
Right.
Maybe setting goals for me now is hope I live tomorrow. I don't know, but like I say, that's out of my control.
Right.
What I don't have control of, I don't worry about, because it ain't going to change. And worried about, all that does is add tension, on it. So if you have no control over it, why should you even worry about it?
Amen.
So every time I went through training, they'd come out, this is what we'll do today. And a lot of guys said, oh my God, how are we going to make it? How do we make it? Well, don't worry about it. We got to get to the swim first. And after the swim, we get through that. Then guess what? We get the run. Then we'll get the run done.
Yeah.
And after that, now we got to go to classroom. Well,
Yeah.
it means we can rest in the classroom, thank God. We got it then. Then we got to run to the chow hall, or because every time you went to eat chow, it was a harassment the whole way there. I mean, doing push-ups, doing this, doing that, but the whole thing is, you got through that day and you said, hey, I'm looking forward to the next day.
Right.
You go to bed, have a couple of beers with your buddies. And even though we weren't old enough to drink, we always had guys that are older by us. We'd sit in our little Quonset hut, because we didn't have that beautiful place on the beach. We had on the bay on these little World War II Quonset huts, drinking in our mattresses about 3 inches thick, and having a beer with each other.
Right.
But it was that camaraderie, that friendship, that caring about each other. And if a guy had a problem, you'd take him to the side. I mean, I helped a lot of guys that couldn't swim. I help them. We go to the pool after finishing. I'd work with them in the pool, or I'd do this. And we got other guys that are great runners.
Right.
Heck, so the thing is, you got to get through that daily trend, and you say, hey, I can do this.
Right.
You tell yourself, hey, I'm proud of myself. It's okay to say I'm proud of myself, but don't think there's going to be something around the corner that you don't need help. And people help me as I help them. And it's like I said, if we all could do it, Alabama would only have one football player, but he'd be, or Clemson. That's my team. Yeah. But they can't. They have to do it as a team, and that's what the word team.
Right.
But I'm kind of upset with some of these new kids. I didn't talk about till it was declassified. I was in MACSOC, and I did some other operations that haven't even been declassified yet.
Right.
But I never talked about Tommy never talked about his operation. But some of these kids now, they come back, well, the word needs to be, well, they're doing it for self-satisfaction. They're doing it. It took me almost 48 years to write a book.
Yeah.
These guys are doing it while they're still in the military. And as far as I'm concerned, they have a responsibility to the teams. You have a responsibility to the guys that are still trying to do it the right way.
Amen.
And don't go out by yourself and say, I'm doing this for them. You're not doing it for nobody. You're letting out secrets. Like Robert O'Neill, he said, well, I put a bullseye on my back. I got bad news for you, Mr. O'Neill. You put a bullseye on everybody's back and everybody with their family's back.
Yeah.
You know?
Right.
And I don't know why you think you're such a better SEAL than I am.
Yeah.
You know, what makes you so great?
Right. It is a difference in mindset for sure. And it's been interesting to watch the evolution of the military, but to hear stories like yours, and one of the things, that I have a very dear friend of mine, Colin Barbado, who was he was an academy guy, who went to West Point and was a commissioned officer. And one of the things that he said frustrated him the most is whenever people would call them heroes, or and he's like, soldiers don't look at it that way. They look at it as, this is what I signed up for. This is my job. And I've always had great admiration for that, because I do. I mean, I look at you and you have the credentials of, by any stretch of the imagination, whatever a hero is, that's what, Mike Thornton has achieved. But I know that if I told you that, you'd probably say, no, I was executing a mission. And that's just, to me, that military tradition that we have is something that I have always found extremely remarkable. And it seems to be a common thread for the most part. And now some of that, I understand exactly what you're saying.
Well, Neil, I mean, and I've talked to him. I mean, it's done. And, the thing is, but it's a responsibility you have. I mean, why did I go back for Tommy? Everybody asked me why I went back for Tommy, because Tommy would have done the same for me.
Yeah.
That's that camaraderie, that teamwork, that teamship, that belief you have in each other,
Right.
and that's the way I am with my family. I'm going to be there for them. You want to talk bad about me, go ahead, but don't mention nothing bad about my family around me.
Right.
Then you have to really deal with the bad guy.
Well, and let's get into this. So, and how long was it, by the way, after you finished your BUDS training and you have made it through and you get your trident, you are now a Navy SEAL, that you actually went on the mission that would eventually you'd be awarded the Congressional Medal of Honor for? How long was the gap between?
It was about a little bit over 4 years.
Okay, so you had numerous operations.
Yeah, I had other tours over there in Thailand and other places, which we never talked about Thailand. Yep. Of course, what we were doing in Thailand is because we were up on the borders. But of course, back then, now everybody in the world knows it now, because we're giving Medal of Honors to guys in LRP teams in Laos and Cambodia and stuff like that. But you didn't get anything for that. I mean, and I was over there for a year. But I never talked about that, and we didn't talk. We didn't talk to the guys in the teams about it.
Right.
Because we were told not to. This is strictly confidential. It's the need to know basis. And we were basically working for the State Department over there.
Tell me this, Mike. Because this, forgive me. This may sound like somewhat of a silly question, but first of all, there's probably not. Whenever you're going on a special ops mission, there's not a lot of lead time, right? You learn about it in pretty short order before you actually go execute the mission, right? Because of that, the secrecy of it. So, as a special operative about to go do something very dangerous with a very limited number of people, usually under the cover of night or something to that degree, as a soldier, how does that impact you? What mentally, are you excited? I've trained for this. This is what I signed up for. I'm about to go do what I came to do to defend my country. There's got to be some nerves. Just what goes through your mind once you get the mission? Kind of take the listener through what that's like to be a Navy SEAL, get your assignment, and then prepare. And you don't have that long to prepare to go get after it next.
We just had a couple of days. The only person who knew about the operation was our big boss, Commodore Shibley. His counterpart and the Vietnamese the senior guy. They're in charge of all Naval Special Forces, and Tommy and myself.
Right.
Well, I had to pick 3 guys. Well, I picked 2 guys that I had worked with before on previous tours of Vietnam. Very good. I handpicked them, but they didn't know nothing. They just knew they were going on operation. I told them exactly what they would be carrying and taking. One was going to be our radio operator and stuff. And Tommy and I went over the plan, and we didn't even let anybody know about it. We just had those 2 junks, and we took off. It goes back again. It's no use worrying about it. You're going. So, So, because if you worry about dying, or you worry about this, or you worry about that, you have no control. If the bullet's meant to hit you, it's meant to hit you.
Right.
You know, you're not going to ask for it. But so you go in there and you do your operation. You stay focused on what it is, and that's trying to get everybody in and everybody out.
Right.
Alive. But I'll try to accomplish our mission. Well, we accomplished our mission. We did it all. We found out and got everybody out alive. Wow. 4 of us were wounded, but we got, we were able to get everybody out. And so, like I say, you don't worry about it. That was out of my control. I was in the military. They asked me to do something, and I know why they asked me to do. I was handpicked by Tommy, because at this period of time in Vietnam, we trade off a Navy SEAL and a Navy SEAL officer with the Vietnamese LD as a Navy SEALs. And this operation, it was no choices. It was Tommy and I were picked by Commodore Shibley.
Okay. Because
he used to be my CO. He was my CO twice before, once at SEAL Team 1, once at EOD school.
Okay.
And he said, I will, yes, sir, but I want to take this one guy. He said, it's Mike Thornton. He said, yes, sir, it is.
Wow.
So, and Tommy, that was the only time we ever operated.
Oh, really?
We knew of each other.
Oh, really?
Background. We had never operated together till that day.
Because that was my next question. Was, and then how many subsequent missions did y'all do together?
None.
Really?
That was the first one ever. I'd worked with the other guys, but never with Tommy.
Wow.
And all the enlisted guys all knew me real well, because they were all, at that time, all the officers were from the East Coast, SEAL Team 2, and all the enlisted guys were all from West Coast, SEAL Team 1. Okay. So they all knew who I was. So.
Okay. All right. So now let's just tee this up and just take me to that day that you get the ultimate, what would end up being one of the most profound missions. Let me ask you that. Wait, let me just back up before I even say that, Mike. So there's one that you received the Congressional Medal of Honor for going back and getting Tommy. So there was a moment in that mission, but as a mission in general, was it any more challenging? Does it any more meaningful does it stand out as different, or was it just another of the missions that just something extraordinary happened? I mean, or do you even think about it like that? Do you even rank them as far as complexity? And
I don't rank the missions. I'd been to other missions I thought was just as bad as that, except we weren't in Vietnam. We had air support. We had this. We had that. Right. Which is always great to know you have air support. Or we had fast boats that would come up the rivers and get us. And these guys have got miniguns on them and 50 caliber machine guns on them, and it really could turn the tide. But there'd been a lot of times we're running for our damn life to get out of there to get that support.
Yeah. Right.
So I've been in a lot of tough spots in my life, and I understood that, and I never worried about it then. Right. A lot of guys used to say, Mike, don't worry about anything. It's no use worrying about it. Like I said before, if you worry about all the things I talked about, you can't stay focused on the job. And the job is to get everybody out. Some people get so, said, how do you do this? I've had guys cry. Right. How do you do this? Why do you keep going back? Why? There's no why about it. It's because I've signed up for it. I asked for it. And I wanted to be over there to help my guys. Right. So, I mean, the thing is, I had another officer by the name of Tom. Tom Boyhan was one of the greatest officers I ever served with, but he didn't believe in medals. So, really? I mean, we did some amazing things. I mean, what we did in South Vietnam at that period of time was amazing. I mean, we kicked butt and took names and things that, I mean, you look around and you'll see some of the pictures in here.
Pretty amazing.
Us, and basically, but you just, it's like I said, you don't go to war for accolades and awards. You go there to take care of each other.
Right. So, all right. So now this mission, it comes up. The walk us through that. The mission, the when you receive it and what the orders are, and kind of just this, take us through the story of what would become this now kind of defining moment in yours and for sure Tommy's life.
Basically, we were asked to go up north. The Quaviet, the NVA had already moved down to Quang Tri Providence, of course, in Way City in 10 to 68, and They're on the move to Way City,
Right.
and we were able to fight on back with the Army, the ARVNs, and the Vietnamese Marine Corps, along with all our air support and stuff.
Okay.
And so they wanted us to do what we call it was because the best intelligence you can get is actually do a up-to-date recon, but the really way we can do it because we didn't have satellite and all that kind of crap you have now.
And what would that up-to-date recon look like, Mike? I mean, it literally just kind of getting as close as you could to the.
No, got in and went through it.
Just went,
and
wow.
Snuck around in it.
Yep.
And then we're going to do what we call a body snatch. Of course, the best way to do is to capture one of those guys, intel that, and then we get a better idea.
Okay.
Of course, we know what force is because we're going in against the NVA. We aren't going out to the VC.
Right.
So by having him in his uniform and all this other stuff, that gives us a lot of intel too. So what we did, nobody knew anything about the operations except Tommy and I, and we had two junks. I had another guy by the name of Woody Woodruff, a Navy SEAL, great guy, unbelievable. Hadn't it been for Woody, we'd all probably be dead. Tommy and the whole guys would have been dead. And he had a bunch of LD&N SEALs on there, and we had he had two IBS on their rubber boats, and we had two on our boat. And on my boat, we had Tommy, me, Quan and Dang, the two guys I handpicked, and they had Ty with a young officer. It was supposed to be another guy by the name of Quan that I had operated with, and he was a very good officer. But this guy, Ty, I'd never worked with him, and I wasn't too crazy about taking him, but, they said we had to have a Vietnamese officer because this was supposed to be a Vietnamese patrol supported by the American SEALs.
Okay.
And we were working for MACSOC at the time, going behind the lines. So we had to take a Vietnamese officer. We got the junks. I had already made sure we had all the equipment that I requested and stuff like that. I just told the guys what to bring. I checked their equipment. We checked their equipment, and they were ready to go. We got on the junks, and we told the junk CEO just go straight due east. And we went out 15 miles because they got intel guys, bad guys, seeing because you could only go north or south on the beach. So if we went north, they'd call in and they were going north, or going south. So they know exactly what to be looking for. So you go 15 miles out to sea where they can't see you.
Right.
Then we turned north. Then we traveled up for several hours until we got to our objective. And we made cons with the. At the time, it was the USS Newport News, and the admiral aboard had the Navy out there. Excuse me. And it also had the USS Mahan out there, which is a destroyer out there. And they were going to vector us in. A vector is where you have two radars shooting a point on land, and that's our insertion point.
Okay.
Well, right before you're setting up for the vector, then we're setting about 5 miles off the coast, but it's still dark, and so nobody would be able to see our reflection or our silhouette. And but during that period of time, us moving in place, the U.S. Newport News had to leave because Quan Tri was being overtaken again by the Vietnamese NVA. And the Newport News, the cruiser, had 8-inch guns on it, and it had the farthest of any gunfire support there. Okay. And they started lobbing. They were getting called in by Army Special Forces. They're calling in the rounds from the U.S. Newport News. So they vector us in. Well, when they vector in this one radar, the young man was about 3 degrees off. Well, if you're 3 degrees off at 2 miles away, that's not that big, but when you're 15 miles away, and so we overshot our objective, our where we were actually going to swim into by almost 14 clicks, and a click is 1,000 meters.
Okay.
So instead of being in the DMZ or Quaviet, which is right south of the DMZ, the Quaviet Naval River Base, we're right on the edge of North Vietnam and the DMZ. We're in the north edge.
Wow.
So when we saw a river, we thought it might have been the Qua Viet. It was the Ben Ha River, which is in North Vietnam. So
okay. And just so the listener doesn't understand, is this DMZ, demilitarized zone. So basically, what you've gone much closer into into very dangerous territory than what you thought and what y'all were hoping to land, right?
Yeah, but up there they had the Russian 188s,
Yeah.
howitzers. They had the tanks up there. They had all the
So you're going right into the belly of the beast, but
That's right.
you don't realize it. Got it.
So we crawled up. The IBS took us in approximately about maybe a mile. Then we swim all our equipment in, and we got the water's edge, and I'm looking up there, and I said, I don't. And I had a starlight scope. Of course, the starlight scopes back then was about 3 feet long and weighed 18 pounds. It's like carrying an M60, an extra M60. And I said, I don't see it. So Tommy said, why don't you go ahead and we'll stay here in the surf zone. I said, okay. And so I went ahead across the beach and got up on top of the dune, and I'm looking down both ways. And I said, well, let's get Tommy up here and let's discuss what we got a problem, because I couldn't see the river. And this river is like the mouth, not quite as big as the mouth of the Mississippi, but it's a big, big river. I mean, they had LTSs, LSTs going in there, dropping off equipment, help with the Marines and all that kind of stuff. So I got Tommy over first, and we kind of set up an area of operation. And then we brought each guy up one at a time. I'd take this little red filter light. When I hit it twice, they'd clear to come, because I'd be looking up and down, and Tommy was watching our western flank. Got everybody up there, and we got together. And I said, Tommy, I think we're in the wrong place. And Tommy says, why don't you go north? I said, okay. I'll go by myself. And I said, so I took off some of my gear. I had law rockets on me and all this other stuff. I'm going to take. So if I have to move fast, I'm going to just take my web belt, and I had magazines in my web belt too, besides the other, and my weapon and the starlight scope. I mean, we had cameras and binoculars. We had all kind of crap. I counted them, 8 frag grenades and some other stuff, but I always kept those with me too. So patrolled about 15 minutes up. Didn't see nothing. Came back, told Tommy. And then I patrolled south about 15 minutes. Came back, didn't see nothing. I said, Bud, I don't. This river's, we're way off, And at that period of time, I said, what do you want to do, Tom? He said, what's your recommendation? I said, well, we don't know where we are. My recommendation is we go back out and rest up the day and try to get in the right position. Tommy said, well, we're already here. They've already pulled away. And Woody, he got all the guys that paddled us in, got them all on board, and he went back out, so they weren't silhouetted anything, seeing that somebody's off the shore there. And at that time, we had comms with Woody, who said, we think we're in the wrong insertion point, but we're just going to go ahead and do what we call a horseshoe. And a horseshoe is that you stay here, you go 5 clicks in, 5 clicks up, and 5 clicks back out.
Okay.
And he said, what do you think? I said, hey, you're the boss. You make the call. I'm going to be right there with you. So Tommy took the point, and I took rear security, and we put the Vietnamese in. And usually we're spread out, but I wanted to keep everybody together,
right,
because it'd be easier for us to control them. My Vietnamese was pretty good. Tommy's wasn't the best, right, but I'd been over there a lot more times than he had. And so we patrolled, and as we patrolled, we did our 5 kicks, but we could see bonfires around us. We could hear people talking and stuff like that. And back then, of course, when you have a GPS, everybody said, what would you wish you'd had? I said, a cell phone, a GPS. Yeah. But, we used to march. I'd do that, and I'd tie little knots in a string. I said, we've gone 1,000 meters, or we're going 100 yards, and that. Then we said, and I'd pick up Tommy. I said, we've gone. So then we went north, and got our little compass up there. So we're going north, and we know when we went another 5 clicks, we'd turn around and go back to the east,
right,
And so it was worn out and stuff, but the Vietnamese, they hear all these people talking and see all this shit poop on patrols, and we're down really low. And I look at the Vietnamese guys, and their eyeballs about this damn big, about the size of about not a half a dollar, but hell, a damn silver dollar.
Right.
And it was kind of cute. And I could tell the officer was really, and I'll explain that story later on. And but Quan and Dang were right there and everything. So we went up to our next point to make our patrol back out to the east, and we came up, and I'm looking through the Starlight scope, and I'm looking on top of this plateau, and I said, told Tommy to hold, and I went up there and we're talking because he kept looking back and checking me, and I was, said, okay, just we're all together, no problem, let's keep moving. And I said, I told him to hold, and we hold, and I crawled up next to him, and I said, look up there, take this starlight scope. He says, holy crap. That's the biggest, that was a cuss word for Tommy. Gosh darn, holy crap. Right. And there was a big tank sitting up there, and there's another one sitting off to the side. He said, what do you think? I said, I know we're in the wrong place now because they don't have none of those across the Quavia yet.
Right.
So, and then next thing I know, we're patrolling. I said, we're going east now. I said, well, let me take the point. I know you're tired because running point is it's not just it's tiring because cutting your way through and all that stuff and moving slowly, and you're really focused on what's going on.
It's got to be mentally exhausted.
That's what it is, very mentally exhausted. Yeah. So we're patrolling back out, and I saw this kind of creek. Of course, up where we were up north, the tidal range is 18 feet. Mm-hmm. So you go down to the Gulf Coast down here, it's like 4.5 feet. So you imagine the tidal. So I saw this stream, and it was running out, and I said, well, the tide's going out. And I said, well, Tommy. So I got down inside it, and it was too deep for the guys to walk in. They couldn't do it. But I said, but it was up where they could walk in it. Right. And we did it for 3 reasons. One, our silhouette was way down below, and I wasn't worried about us falling in because after seeing all these people walking around and patrolling, and not saying that they got their areas booby-trapped, but the bonfires and stuff. And I said, so that would lower our silhouette. We could move a lot faster knowing the tide was going out. And before we were just moving so slow, so we could shuffle our legs and wouldn't make any noise in the water.
Right.
Now, if we'd have been walking in 5 inches of water, that's a different thing, but not. And so the silhouette moving faster and not being able to be detected by patrolling. So I said, yes, get in the thing. Tommy said, I agree with you. So as we're moving back out towards the ocean, I could hear the ocean. Then we heard all this talking. And it was on our right, our southern flank, which is on our right side. And on our left side, there was a big lagoon. You ever seen going across the Mississippi River and you see where the rivers change its course? Well, they do the same thing up there. And so there was this big lagoon. It was about 2.5 miles wide of water and about 5 miles long. Okay. And then Tommy said, check that out. And I said, so I took all my gear off and took my gun. I crawled up into this village, and it was a stronghold for a quick reaction force. And the reason they had these up and they're on the beach is all these very dense palm trees and stuff, and where a lot of this area where it was pretty open, but this is that. So I crawled up there and I counted approximately, it's about 4 something in the morning, and I counted about, I could see the rifles sitting outside and stuff, and we figured they had anywhere from 60 to 75 guys, and it was more like 75 after, because that was the first group that we dealt with the stuff. So we moved on out, and we came to the ocean. Well, we knew that we had no radio because it was used the old PRC 77. It's like if you had a straight line like across the water, you may get 5 miles. Right. If you're down everywhere else, you got nothing. Yeah. So it's a line of sight type. Yep. And so Tommy said, what do you do? I said, well, there's a big sand dune. I thought it was a sand dune. Basically what it was a big bunker. They actually had a tunnel down inside so that people could sit up and walk. So you had a flat thing on the top, and it was about 25 feet high. Okay. So I knew we had the ocean on our eastern flank. I knew we had the big lagoon on our western flank. I knew the bad guys, we had the creek in between us on our southern flank, and as far as we could see, 500 yards back was one sand dune by itself, so it was all flat ground. Okay. So Tommy's on the radio. I move up to the point where the bad guys are. I took Ty, the Vietnamese officer, because I've never worked with him, put him over next to the ocean. So if I got flanked, I could take care of the flank on my western side, but he could watch the eastern side. And I put Quan, and I put him back at rear security and gave him the starlight scope. And I said, if you see anybody you let die, we know. Okay. So we were waiting there, and Tommy finally got gunfire support, but they didn't know where we were. We didn't know where we were. We tried to explain where we were,
Right.
and they couldn't figure it out because they had gone back down to the Quaviette River.
Okay.
When it was getting times, they said, okay, the Quaviette's right here. So that little mistake by that young radio was really bad thing. But so Quan comes around and tells me, he says, Mike. I said, yeah, Quan. He gives me the signals, two enemy are walking down there. And so I went back and I take the Starlight scope. And I'm looking down the Starlight scope. One guy's walking on the low water line, which it was going down to low tide, and just checking. They had a couple little light things. They were just checking for footprints. Well, the other guy was up in the sand dunes, and I'm watching him. He gets that one about 500 yards away, but he was kind of walking back and forth, looking to see if there's anybody, because we'd been up there before, but we just never had gone inland before. We just been up there to survey. So Tommy came down and said, what do you want me to do? I said, well, you stay up there, let's get some communications. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to take Ty, which Ty was about 5'10". He's a big Vietnamese. He probably weighed 170 pounds. I'm going to have Ty take out the guy on the beach. So I was carrying what they call a hush puppy. It's, of course, against the convention, but it was a silencer. So when you were in really bad situations, you'd have to get up and close, and you just go like that. And it was a 22 long that you could lay down the enemy with. And it was for moving in and out of really tight spaces. So the other guy was approximately 100 yards behind him, in a football field behind him, because he was looking around, spending more time than the other guy. Right. The other guy's just tooling down the beach. You both of them got AK-47s. So the guy, I saw him going around that one sand dune, and I'm watching him. He's coming up close to us. So I took Quan, short guy, I put him over near the western side of the flank just in case he came around that way. But he came up the eastern side, and he came around that bunker, and I took the butt of my gun and hit him right in the head and knocked him out. Wow. And Quan ran around, and he took him, and we used ties at that time, and he secured the guy and stuck a bandana in his mouth and tied him. And I was going like this to Ty, the officer, and he was about 50 feet in front of me. But with the waves breaking and the guy right on the water line, I said, man, this is a great time. He can just still half dark, and you sneak up behind him because he's not even looking back. I watched him the whole time. He never looked back and wanted to check on his guy. And I told him to go like this. So he stands up. This guy's probably 100 yards away with the tide going out, and he yells, "Lide Mount Lynn," that means stop here. And he's got this cap pistol, which if you shot somebody between here and that wooden door over there, it may probably bounce off of him. But I mean, because you lose all, right, unless you're up there. And he turns around that AK-47 and he opens fires on him. And I said, "Holy crap!" So I'm running down there because I could see he's cutting a trail, but he's 100 yards off down this way. So I'm running this way. Ty's running back towards everybody else. I said, "Where's this idiot going?" So I'm chasing the guy down. And he got to the mouth of the trail going into the village up there, and I dropped to one knee, and I shot 2 rounds. I hit him in the back, and he fell to the ground. Oh. Well, when he shot that burst of rounds, everybody up there didn't have radio. So what they'd do, they would contact guys, and they'd shoot so many rounds, and it meant different, kind of like Morse code or something like that. And it meant something. And I said, I hope this doesn't mean trouble, but it did. So I look up, and here comes about 75 bad guys coming after me. And I went running back across the creek bed. At that time, it was basically empty except for the water that was caught in there. And Tommy sees me, and Tommy runs down with a raw rocket, and he shoots the raw rocket into the tree line. He's not trying to hit anybody, but He's just trying to hit a tree to get a big explosion and for me to break contact with these guys, because I wasn't going to be able to run all the way back with them shooting at me. Right. It worked. I got up on the point. I told Tommy, I said, I'm going to move up here. I put Quan over on my eastern flank, about 50 yards behind me where I could keep my eye on him. And I put Ty at rear security because I knew I couldn't count on him. And Tommy got back up there. He said, we got communications. And I said, okay. Well, the guy we captured, Tommy had him up there, and he pointed out on the map where we were. So Tommy was able to give him the coordinates. And he said, boy, you really are off course. I said, tell us about it.
Right.
So I was up on the point. So it was me and Quan. Dane was shooting from the top. He had the radio in his bag. Tommy was on the radio, and then he'd shoot. He saw somebody trying to flank me down the western side. Then he's going back to get the coordinates where we were at and stuff like that, because we need to get that gunfire support up here. And the U.S. man was on the way, and Woody found out, and he's coming up charging with the 2 junks with the other 10 LD&N Vietnamese SEALs. And we got up there, and the firefight started. Well, what I did, I'd got out on the point, and these guys were well trained, but they would come up to the sand dune and they start raising their head, and I could see the top of their head come up, and I'd do a headshot about an inch in the sand, and I'd get them every time. So I'd pop a few over here, then I'd roll over here and do the same thing. Then I'd move forward and I'd throw a grenade over there. Then I'd drop back and throw a grenade from back there. Back then I could throw the baseball really well, and then I'd move over to the other flank. Well, when they tried to, flank me on my thing, there's my boy Quan, which I knew he was a damn good shot, and he would lay them down. And they said, so it gave them a false pretense as how many, if we had 10 or 15 guys or 20 guys, because they said, good Lord, we're getting hit over here and here and here. Well, this had gone on for almost 2 hours, and which I have the Mahan log right here for the story, the movie that we're doing is, and I was going through it, and when they got contact with Tommy, and Tommy said we're taking fire, they put it in their log, and I got a copy of their log, so we knew exactly. And when the radio was blown away, they took another log, no more communications, and I said we're going in the water. And that's when Tommy he said, so we worked our way all the way back. Well, I was about 25 yards from the bunker where Tommy was, and Quan was right back over here next to me, and Ty was still on the other side. And so at that period of time, I don't know how many people I eliminated. I was kind of laughing. Tommy said, "Why are you laughing for?" I said, "Crying ain't gonna do us no good." Just we kept things. I mean, there's no use getting. Yeah. It is what it is. You do what you can do, and the only thing I was doing was fighting for everybody's life. And I already eliminated a bunch of people because I was down to like 2 magazines left, and I had 780 rounds, and I only shot like 1 or 2 rounds every time. I wasn't much on this automatic stuff. Wow. Because I knew those rounds each one of them had to count. And I had already gone through 8 frag grenades, and I've gone through my two to break contact up. Sometimes I threw some smoke out there to kind of cover me, and as I moved to another place when they got closer, because it was close. So I'm at this one send, and so this guy, you see that grenade over there? It's called a Chi-Com grenade, that one with the wooden handle.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. And that's what they use. They were really crudely made. But on the inside, you unscrew those 2 screws, and it's lead. And they've got it where they've taken like a drill or something, and they've scraped it so it's got like a little quarter-inch, like a frag grenade,
right?
Where we have more like ball bearings in there. This has little things. So it's basically stuffed with a stick with TNT. Right. Stuff they got out of our bombs that didn't explode. Wow. And then they have this, and I'll show it later on, the little pull string. I'll show it to you. And you pull this pull string. Well, it's like a match down there, and you pull this string out. Well, we had captured a bunch of those, and we used to take them and test them and go, American grenade, and it would go, the American grenade is 4 sections. You pop that pin, you got 1,000, 2,000, 3,000, 4,000. Kaboom. Right. And this here, the one that went off the fastest was 18,000, and the longest one was about 29,000.
Oh wow!
So I yelled grenade, and I grabbed that grenade, and I'm going 1,000, 2,000, because I'd already thrown on my grenades, and I threw that grenade back over. I'm going 11,000, 12,000. The damn grenade comes back over, because they knew how long it took. I'm going, good God Almighty. I said, I'm going 20,000, 21,000. I threw the damn thing. I'm going 28,000. And they came back over. I said, it's got to go off, because, I mean, we threw hundreds of those out there.
Oh, my gosh.
And 29, 30,000 as long as, unless they were just a dud.
Right.
And I turned over, and the grenade went off, and I was hit 6 times in my back.
Oh, my.
And I yelled, and Tommy's yelling, Mike, buddy, Mike, buddy. And I wouldn't say a word. I'm just laying on my back, because I know those guys are coming over, and they did. One came around each side, and one came over, and I eliminated all 4 of those guys right there. And they're all falling back. Well, this 2 hour and 51 minute firefight, I said, I don't know what's going on, but it's not good. Tommy said, why is it not good? I said, for them to fight us for all this time, it seemed like just a few seconds, but after we found out how long it was, and, we knew it was hours, because they'd stop and kind of fall back and then move forward. For them to take this much real estate and fall back, and I took my binoculars, and I'm looking over. I said, Tommy, look across the lagoon. It was the 681st NBA Battalion. It was coming in. They were coming in on trucks, and they were surrounding us. But they were coming around the lagoon. They jumped in the creek bed. I could see them, and they were going around the other end of the lagoon, coming up. And you could see Tommy's looking through his binoculars. Of course, he had a 25 feet higher, so he had a better view. He said, I counted over 100, and he said, there's hundreds behind them. And I said, Tommy said, we need to fall back. And we fell back to that one sand dune behind us to the north of us. And that's when I could see the Ben Ha River, the mouth of the Ben Ha. And Tommy said, you fall back, me and Dang will cover your retreat, then we'll come back. Well, we got back, and I'm yelling for him to come back. Well, Dang came back. He had been shot through the radio twice. He had 2 pieces of metal lodged in his back, so the radio was no good. And I said, where's Dawi? He said, Dawi's dead. That means, where's the lieutenant? I said, Dawi's dead, Mike. He's shot in the head. He's dead. I said, stay here. And him and Quan both grabbed me. I said, stay here. Cover me. Well, when I did that, went back from Tommy, the Vietnamese officer jumps in the water and swims away.
Oh, really?
So when I came back, I see Tommy, and he's laying on the side. He had been shot through his left temple, and the whole front part of his forehead was gone, his eye was gone. He's been completely reconstructed for his eye and his stuff. And his lobe part of his brain, the front lobe part of his brain, had been hit, and the bursa was busted, was laying out. So these guys came up the wall, and I eliminated them. Then I grabbed Tommy and threw him on my back. And I saw a smoke round, but I didn't know. It was something from the sea, but I wasn't sure what it was. So I grabbed Tommy and put him on my back, and I was running down the thing, and Tommy had called fire for effect, because he saw the smoke round where it landed. He said, fire for effect. And they put it right on top of us. Oh, and when I'm going down the bunker, I'm going down the big bunker, with Tommy on my shoulders, the first round hit right at the base of the north side of the bunker, and the concussion blew me 25 feet in the air. And of course, I don't know if you've ever been a concussion like that. We thought, but it's like taking your hands and cupping them, and putting somebody's head and hit them in the ears as hard as you can. It's your equilibrium's gone. Yeah. And I knew the bad guys were there, and I could see my gun. And I knew I only had 1 magazine left in my gun. And I see my gun, and I knew the bad guys are still coming after us. And I grabbed my gun, and I went over and grabbed Tommy. And he looks up with that one eye and said, Mike, buddy. Then he went unconscious. I said, the SOB's still alive. Yeah. I grabbed his gun because I knew I was out of ammunition. And he still had his vest on. I could tell that he had rounds in there. So I ran back. There's my boy Quan and Dang out there covering me, killing guys left and right. And as they're chasing us and sand's flying, I'd stop. I wouldn't slow down. I'd just kind of start running backwards a little bit, and I'd open up on automatic then, just to try to get them down. Then we ran, and we got to the sand dune. They said, Mike, what do we do? I said, we swim. And about that time, we did what we call leapfrog. and they said leapfrog means I yell one stop, give a line of fire, two, the next side, and you go around like this, like you used to do a skid, leaping over each other. But this is the way that you always got somebody firing at the bad guys, and I could see them coming down from the north. They had already got around between the lagoon and the Ben Hot River, and we got in the water, and I got Tommy, and I got him in front of me, and what I'm using him like a surfboard. And like I said, I'd already been wounded. Well, when I was going through the water, somebody shot me through my left calf. So I was hitting my left calf. So I had Tommy in front of me carrying him. And then what I do, I push him underneath. We had like 6 lines of surf coming in. Mm-hmm. So the last thing you do is do your life jacket, because all that's going to do is pick you up and carry you back in. So I kept pushing him under there. I could see Dang out in front of me. I could see Quan off to the, he was to the south of me, but he was in front of me, and I had Tommy, so I knew we had everybody going in that period of time. So we got out there. Then when I got through the surf zone, I put my life jacket around Tommy, and it's the old UDT life jacket. Looks like it's got like an H harness that you bring around and you tie together. Well, I put that over my neck, and I started swimming, and as fast as I could. And I was doing the breaststroke because I had Tommy on my back.
While you've got a concussion, you've been shot in the calf, and you've got shrapnel in your back from a grenade.
Yeah.
And now you're swimming out with
Tommy on my back.
Wow.
And then I looked to the south, and you could see the bullets. And I'm saying, God, don't let them hit me now, because the bullets, as you see these moves, bullets going through. Yeah. I could just, as I was breaststroking, I just see those bullets going everything and like that. So I could see Dang, and he was still ahead of me, but I couldn't see Quan. Then I look over to see Quan, and he had been shot through his right buttocks. And he couldn't swim, and he was trying to swim, and they're not the best swimmers. I mean, he was an okay swimmer, but with his legs, he was having a hard time. So I swam down and got Quan, put him in front of me. I put my arms underneath his armpits, and he held on to Tommy. Then I breaststroked after we got out of the range of fire, and that's when I did the first medical bit with Tommy. And I took 2 4x4 gut wounds and put it over his head, and then we swam for approximately 3 hours, and we finally got picked up by Woody.
And you're just swimming out?
No, we started after we got out of the range of fire, and we were behind the had the waves going. This was late in the afternoon.
Okay.
And the tide was coming back in.
Okay.
So by us going south, I knew by going south, that's where the good guys were. Okay. Just going to sea, and Woody came up looking for us and wouldn't give up looking for us, and he found Ty, the officer, and Woody said, "Where's Mike? Where's Tommy? Where's Dang Quant?" And he says, "Tommy's dead," because that's the last word he heard from Dang. Dang and Quan are swimming, so Woody told them the other boat to go look for them. So they came and looked for them. He says, "Mike's missing," and that's the last thing he saw. He just saw me running back. He didn't know if I was dead or alive, anything. Yeah. Well, we saw the boat come in, and I'm swimming with 2 guys on my body, and the boat gets up there, and I'm just physically, mentally just exhausted. And so we got Tommy. They put down a rope, and I tied Tommy I put a big bowline in and slid his body in there and pushed him up, and they got Tommy laying on the ground. Then we got Dang and Quan up there. And then I was trying to get, and I couldn't. I had no more strength. I couldn't pull myself up. Usually, I could do 60 pull-ups, and I could. And so they finally they dropped that rope back. I put Tommy in, and I put my foot into it, and I was grabbing. I was trying to hold up, and all those little Vietnamese up there trying to pull my 212-pound ass up. And it was funny. But when I got there, I said, "Give me the radio," and I called Woody. And I said, "We're all on board. We have a very senior, we're all wounded. Call the Newport News," because I knew they had a doctor on board. Tommy's got a very, very, I don't think he's going to make a head wound. I've been hit 7 times. Quan's had lost the right part of his buttocks just to get these guys, and Dane's got 2 big pieces of metal, like shrapnel wounds in his back. Would he go in there and say, "Oh, I'll meet you"? And I'm steaming towards the Newport News now, because he was like several clicks below me. I said, let the Admiral know they go out with a navy blue. And then when I got there, the Admiral called me up. So I'm doing whatever I can to do with Tommy. Well, I was talking to the doctor that actually, and the great thing about this is that this is at the end of the war, and we knew we were going to get a treaty with the North Vietnamese to get Admiral Stockdale and Bud Day and Leo Thornton, all these great Medal of Honor recipients. And they had everybody at Clark's Air Force Base in the Philippines. Well, in April of 1972, they started pulling all the American troops out. Mm-hmm. And the last group that left was February the 5th, 1972. So we had no specialty doctors. We had no, like surgeons. We had nobody there. So I called in. We got Tommy up there, and I was telling this doctor, he's a lieutenant commander. He was a general surgeon, but he says, this guy's not going to make it. And I said, well, as long as we're going to do everything we can possibly do. So I called Ryan McCumbee, which was my officer that I worked with in my team. I called Ryan. I said, I'm medevacing Tommy right now. I have to go talk to the Admiral, meet him in Da Nang. So he called and got a helicopter, flew down to Da Nang, and he called for a special extraction for Tuy Non, because we were about a 45-minute flight from Da Nang up to Tuy Non. Maybe we were northeast of Hue City, so a little bit more than an hour. So he said, I'm taking off now. I said, well, the medevac's coming out of Da Nang to pick Tommy up and then take him back. So what are you going to do? I said, I'm going to stay here because everybody else is injured except for Ty, and I'll send Ty back with Woody. And I'll see you tomorrow. And I got in, I had a helicopter waiting on me, and I flew down. Tommy, it took us 19 and a half hours to get a medevac from the time of him being shot to Da Nang, and they sent over a 141 medical. That used to be the big cargo planes instead of the C-117s now. And they had a full medical team on there. They flew him at Da Nang back to Clark's Air Force Base. And his surgeon was a guy named, and he just passed away, Wally. And he was actually a guy that helped invent the coil system, where they do up in your brain stuff. And he was a very senior doctor, and he felt he needed to serve his country. So when he came into the military, they made him a colonel.
Wow.
And he went, and Wally is the one that saved Tommy. He said, I talked to Wally after Tommy's first operation was almost 20 hours long.
Good.
And I talked to Wally. I asked him to please, because I couldn't get over to Clark's to see Tommy. And so he called me every day. And but back then all we had was that crazy ham set. Can you hear me now? Over. You're over.
Right.
And but we'd send messages. He would send the blues back to command to Captain Shibley, and I was down.
Yeah.
This time I had moved back down to headquarters outside of Saigon, because he wanted me to brief him.
Right.
So we went down to brief him, and I briefed the Admiral and everybody else. And so we're down there, and I took both Quan and then with me to Saigon, because they were both injured, and that way they were near their families, and we got better medical care for them down there. There was, we did have doctors there, and they had Vietnamese doctors who were pretty good, but we still had surgeons and stuff down there who could help. So Quan comes walking on the crutches, and he comes to me and says, Mike, I said, yeah, Quan, I work with you no more. And I said, why? He said, I always get shot. I said, yeah, but I always bring you back alive. He said, good point.
Wow.
So basically, Tommy was medevac in November from Clark's Air Force Base, and it was back in Bethesda. They flew him straight nonstop to Bethesda. I think they had to stop over in Hawaii to refuel, then to Bethesda, Maryland. He spent approximately 6.5 years there, went through 29 major operations, and had to put all these different, first of all, they had to do something to hold the brain in place, because he lost the front lobal part of your brain, which basically front lobal part of your brain, what taste, smell, a lot of that stuff. Of course, the main part of your brain is back in the back part. That's the nervous system and all that stuff. And they had 3 plates in his head, and I got a thing in March. Somebody came and said, you've been put in for the Medal of Honor, because they had to put me in for the Navy Cross. And John McCain Jr., which is Senator John McCain's father, upgraded. Of course, he's in charge of the whole Pacific operations, and the reason he was supposed to be our next Joint Chiefs of Staff, and the reason he didn't take it, and Admiral Moore stayed in for another 4 years. I gave Admiral Moore Joint Chiefs for 8 years, is because he wanted to, because the only person that can overcall his job, just like in Central Command, is when he's Pacific Fleet, is the President of the United States, and he wanted to be there to make any decisions. They were going to let John McCain trip, Senator, out, but he says no. He said, my father would never talk to me about it. So they let everybody out, and I met Admiral Stockdale, and I went back on May the 15th and received the Medal of Honor.
And so, of course, I know we've talked about it. You've mentioned it a number of times. You don't do it for the medals, but it is such, I mean, you breathe rare air whenever you're a Congressional Medal of Honor winner. I mean, bottom line is it's a very, very small number of individuals that have been honored in such a way. What did it mean to you? I mean,
I think it meant more to my father than it did to me. I really, they had a little piece of tape, and I thought I was going to be the youngest E7 in the Navy, and I thought I was going to get that, but no, they didn't. They said they said if I had more time in the military, because at that period of time I only had like 5.5 years in or something.
And how old were you at this point?
Huh?
How old were you at that
when
point?
I received the medal?
Yeah,
23 years old.
Good grief! Mike, 23. So by the way, so just for the listener, going back to that unbelievable story, you're a kid. You're talking about a kid.
I was 22 years old when I led that operation.
My gosh!
And it goes back about you never give up, you never quit. And leadership is something that you learn. I think some people are born with it more than some people. Yeah. You got to believe in yourself, and my father made me believe in myself. And you're not afraid to take risk. And like I said before, we're going to make mistakes, like you said, too, to me. You learn by your mistakes. Yeah. When I had my command, I'd let guys make mistakes. As long as it wasn't causing somebody in danger or a lot of money, then I'd step in. But you learn from your mistakes, as you said. And I tell all my young officers that work for me that you listen to your NCOs. They've been around for 20, 30 years. Right. And they've been there. So I don't say you aren't going to make the decision, but you need to listen to what they had to do. I'd found out some of my best ideas from E3s. Guys hadn't been in the military for more than a year, because what I do with them, said, if you were in charge, what would you do? And all these guys would held up their hand, and me and my master chief, I wouldn't let the officers be around. My master chief would sit out there, and somebody said, boy, that's a dumb idea. I said, no, it's not a dumb idea. It's a very good idea.
Yeah.
Excuse me.
Well, and I think that you bring something up that I've often told, young managers. One of the things I learned early on, because I told you, when I bought my first business, I didn't know what the heck I was doing, and it showed a lot of times. But one of the things I learned in managing or directing others is that little question, the confidence that it inspires, or that it instills in the subordinate. When you just say, what would you do? What do you think? Because they're not used to hearing that from the boss. And so I think that, and I think it also gains a respect from them that, oh, wow, my CO will listen to me, or what my input actually matters. So I've got, that's one of the things that I learned, that if you just ask somebody that very simple question, what would you do? Now, you may have no intention of taking their advice. You may know exactly what you're going to do. But I've used that as one, yes, to gain some of the best ideas and perspective from somebody that has a completely different view, but also to instill confidence in the people that are with you.
The medal I wear with much pride, what it's given me the ability. You look through my office here, I got pictures of me and Ross Perot and Tommy Franks and Jim Masterman. I've known Secretary Manis for 36 years and asked questions, and Admiral Stockdale and Bud Day and all these great guys. The first Medal of Honor recipient I ever met in my life was Jimmy Doolittle. Yeah, wow. And then guess who introduces me to 2 years later? Yeah. Omar Bradley. Holy, the presidents. I've met every president since Johnson.
Wow.
I didn't say I would vote for him, but I just said I met him. But I was very, President Nixon was my president. Put my medal around my neck. Great American.
Yeah.
Loved this country. And I had the honor to sit down and talk to Gerald Ford and of course, President Reagan, which really was one of my favorites. Both the Bushes, and we just lost, of course, three great men this last year or so. President Bush 41, Ross Perot, and T. Boone Pickens. I'll be going to Mr. Pickens' funeral on Thursday.
Yeah.
But it's given me ability to listen to stories, and they said, I do this. Like this guy right here is the largest stockholder in the middle and waste management. He started out as a Greek son and going to Houston, went to Korea, and going to Houston and getting a degree in engineering. Excuse me. Went back to Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and came out with a machine to take steel belted tires and make it up and melt it down and use it to fix potholes. And anybody's ever been to Pittsburgh, there's a lot of damn potholes up there. And he started his own hazardous waste stuff and things like that, and just a great American. And he's the guy who gave me my first job, and I learned a lot from listening to him.
Mike, let me ask you this: because you have been around and had a front row seat to some of the greatest, most courageous, smartest, bravest individuals that have ever been, what's the common thread you see amongst each and every one of them? If there's a couple of identifying qualities, what would you say it is?
Their leadership ability. They ask questions.
Asking questions.
They ask questions, and you may, like you say, you may not hear what you want to hear, but they've lived it. And I tell my son, you don't do what I did, do what I try to tell you to do. And
right.
I always try to listen to my father, like I said, sooner than later. But the thing is, that's the reason I tell all these kids when we go talk. I try to get out to the teams at least 8 times a year to talk to all the classes, and I talk about, they hear all these stories about Mike Thornton. God, I want to be. No, you don't either, because you won't be in the Navy very long. Don't do as I did, do as I say. And I'm very proud of these kids. And Admiral Olson is our first 4-star. Eric and I are best of friends. We travel around and try to talk to the kids and things like that. And of course, put Bill McRaven through over there at UT and stuff, and I look at all the admirals, Burt Cowan and all these other. We have 2 great retired vice admirals working up there, and Secretary of Defense right now. He calls them their port and starboard. And they're working their butts off for this great nation called America, and we do live in the greatest country in the world. Because I've been to 90 of them, and there's nowhere like this country of ours.
Well, and I think that you're proof positive of that, Mike, in that you've come a long way from installing insulation in South Carolina, for your dad, and construction to, like you said, you've met multiple presidents, and what you do now, it's. That is what America is. It's not what your last name is. It's not where you come from. It's what you do with what you've been given, and that, even if that is not a lot. And I think you've exhibited that in spades.
Well, the thing is you've got to believe in yourself, and so many people want a hand out, not a hand up. And that's what my foundation does. I give a guy a hand up.
I want you to talk about the foundation so that people understand what it is.
Well, it's a small foundation, but I used to do a lot with the Wounded Warrior Project, but 20 years ago, me and the guy who started it got into a little thing, because I used to give my own time and my own money, and I'd go back and teach guys how to dive, and said, even though you're a double amputee or a single amputee, but if I felt that, and we'd take these water scooters, and we'd get them down, let them ride around in there, and just to give them make them feel like, hey, I'm still part of the group,
right.
And I said, you guys got all this money in the bank. We're doing something with it. And he said, of course, when they finally in Bush 43 and I had a discussion about it. He said, well, you got to give somebody. They always give me, they write $1 million to the Fisher House. They write $1 million to your organization. They write $1 million. But when you're raising $50 million, that ain't nothing, because really and truly a 501c3, as long as you give, I think that to make it happen, you got to give like 7% or 7.5% or whatever you make. Then the rest of the money, you know.
Right.
And I mean, they had $281 million at the bank. So I said, man, I can't handle this. So myself and Connie, and with the suggestion of a great friend of mine, he has a pyramid hotel chain out of Boston, and him, and said, Mike, we believe in you. We know you'll do the right thing. Mr. Perot was one of my donors, Dick Grazzo, Mr. Pickens, a bunch of great, Joe Ferran at Matador. That's an interesting guy to talk to. And you talk about leadership. He runs Matador like a family, just like he does. His father and I, Joe and I talk together all the time. And I said, okay. So I said, let's do it. And so Connie and I got together, and Vic Lattimore used to have Lattimore Materials up there. He's the guy on the right side of that picture. And Connie and Vic and I have been friends for 20-something years. And Vic he retired and sold his company. And Connie was saying, well, I'm looking. I said, let's do it together. And we have. And it's been me and Connie. We've been through some tough times. All the money at our first, but we've been now about 7 years, since we came out with the idea, and getting, our bylaws brought up, make sure we're every way legal, and we're here to get a hand up. I don't ask for any money back. It's not a loan. I'm not a bank.
Right.
I'm just trying to but we get scholarships out. They have to keep a standard. I don't ask for A's. I ask for a 3.5, 2.5, which is a C plus.
Mm-hmm.
I see that Connie and I, we look at the report cards. They goes, we keep going. And all the kids that we're doing right now, they're kids of their families were unable to afford it, but
right.
I go through there. We do our due diligence, our DD 214s, our DD 308s, or if there are medical problems, we write a check. And I've got this great board, as I said before.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but it only takes one vote. It's mine.
Right.
There's no votes here.
Yeah.
We just had myself and Rainey, my wife, which is my partner, my soulmate. We were traveling, and we get a phone call from a guy, and he says, "Hey," and Rainey and I were given a scholarship under the name of Eric Christensen. Eric was the senior guy that was killed in the Red Ring operation. Okay. And we get a scholarship every year to Gonzaga. Well, I never knew there was a Gonzaga high school. I thought I was looking at Spokane, Washington. Yeah, so there's quite a few. And we give it in Eric's name every year. Wow. And we're out there giving this, and I get a phone call from a guy, and he says, "Hey, Mike." And then this was in November, right before Thanksgiving, or December. I can't think, the 1st of December. And him and I, he's part of the Marine Corps Law Enforcement Foundation, and I give about $50,000 a year to that, but we give out scholarships and other things to help fallen law enforcement on active duty and Marines, and they do help out the SEALs too. So he calls me up and says, "Mike," I said, "Yeah," and he says, "We got an old World War II vet, and he has no furnace, and he's in Saginaw, Michigan, and it's about 13 below zero." And I said, "Well, give me his name." And I said, "Give me his DD 214. So he was in the Army in World War II and this. And I told Connie and I were sitting here. And I said, "Get on the phone and call, who's a good furnace company in Saginaw, Michigan." And she called and told the guy, I said, "I'll FedEx a check out to you right away." And he said, "No, we'll do it, and we'll have it done." And next day, I get a phone call from him. They had a brand new furnace. It was only like $6,000,
Wow.
He said, "I don't know why I deserve to do this." I said, "You're a veteran," because I give to all veterans. I don't care if you're Vietnam or World War II or whatever.
Right.
I mean, and so that was in December, and Rainey and Connie were kind of tearing up and stuff. Hell, I was too. So, in March, my wife and I were in New York. It was the day before my birthday, and I get a email from him. He says, Mike, I just want to let you know, I still don't know what I deserve out of that furnace, but my wife got sick and just passed away yesterday, but she died warm. And I want to thank you for that.
Wow.
And if I don't,
Wow.
you know, so it's like I say, these are just hands up. Everybody's not as lucky as me. I've been very lucky in my life. You'd say I'd be sitting at this desk and all this stuff and look about from that damn redneck hillbilly, and I am a redneck, and you know, Cherokee, Indian, Irish, Scottish, screwed up as Hogan's goat, you know, and I'd be sitting here and doing what I'm doing today. I just laugh at you.
You're the first guy since my dad that I've ever heard mention Hogan's goat.
Yeah.
So we come from, I think we come from similar stock, Mike. That's hilarious. That's hilarious. Well, tell me this. Let's talk before I let you go. Let's talk about the book a little bit. You know, and then I want to talk. You mentioned the movie, which I didn't know about.
Yeah, well, the book is a bestseller. It's a 5-star. It's by Underbound. It's about two guys, Tommy Norris and myself, both Medal of Honor recipients. That our friendship, camaraderie is like my brother said. I think you love Tommy more than you love me. I said I don't love anybody more than you, but I love Tommy. But Tommy and I've been through things. It's not like you and I fighting in the hills, you know, punching each other in the nose. It was a whole different type of thing. So, and our friendship and our camaraderie is always there. He'll be coming in on Sunday for my golf tournament that we're doing out at Dallas Country Club.
And talk a little bit about that, so that the listener, if they want to,
well, we
get involved next year. Might be too short now, but just where they can find out.
Well, Connie and Rainey and I, we bring in Medal of Honor recipients. We also sponsor everybody in the armed forces. We bring in a team for the Army, Navy, Marine Corps, and that we bring in disabled vets and stuff like that. So the guys will buy a foursome, and when they buy a foursome, we'll put a veteran with them, you know. Okay. And some of the Medal of Honor recipients don't play golf that much, but they'll get out and ride and laugh and giggle. And so we just have a great time. And Connie really puts together, her and Jeanette and them, and we have a great team. And the money goes straight to it's our biggest fundraiser every year. I do speeches all around. And they write I don't get paid. They write the check to the foundation. Right. So it's a good way for us to do it. People like Panasonic and Smith Barney and, I mean, good Lord, banks, investment guys, and a lot of people like Jim McInville, or which believes in the American people, or Corby Robinson, which is, you know, down and stuff. Different people like that, and they write a check to the foundation. Dick Grazzo, I do stuff for him. John Lee, I mean, guys, Ken Langone started, Home Depot.
I actually I used to work for Home Depot. Back whenever they hired Bob Nardelli, and so.
Well, Bob Nardelli's another guy that sponsors me, and Bob's a great guy, and. You know, and Bob actually, they were the first major corporation that when you got called out of the reserves, he matched the monies where the family didn't, and if they had a problem at home or a refrigerator or something like that, Home Depot took care of it. Then Lowe's followed it on, and then a lot of major corporations.
Well, it's like I mentioned Cullen Barbado earlier. That's where Cullen and I met, because the executive leadership program that I was in. They actually, Bob Nardelli implemented a program that they had at GE to hire as many JMOs as they could. And that didn't mean you had to be a JMO. You could be general enlistment, whatever, but he had a heart for helping veterans and those that had come out of the military that were making that transition into civilian life. And Home Depot has always been one of the best companies for that. And but yeah, Bernie Marcus, Arthur Blank, Ken Langone, that whole
Arthur
team,
Blank, the Bernie,
unbelievable.
And I mean, Arthur Blank is such a great gentleman. Bernie is too, and they're big supporters of the Medal of Honor Society. All three of them are, and actually, Ken and Dick and all these guys. I mean, great entrepreneurs, great Americans, set on our foundation, and they kind of. They've helped me with running businesses and taking their advice. And like I say, you got some of the smartest people in the damn world, and you're a dumb idiot if you don't take their advice. At least listen to them.
That's right. They're brilliant guys.
Actually, Dick just called me today. Actually, this is a book that he wanted me to sign to
Really?
for a friend of his.
Well, funny about you probably know this. It's a pretty well known story, but it ties to another friend of yours, that, like you say, one of the great individuals we lost, great Texans we lost, and Ross Perot. You know, Ross Perot was supposed to be one of the initial investors of Home Depot, but he didn't do it because it was either Bernie and Arthur or Bernie. They wanted a Cadillac as part of the deal. They wanted a company car as a Cadillac, and Ross Perot said, "No, I'm not going to invest in your company."
Still the biggest big buyout there. So.
He said, "I'm not doing it." But obviously Ken Langone, he saw, and also here's another little.
Well, Ken Langone was Ross Perot's CFO.
Oh yeah. I mean that was the tie. Ken went ahead and did it. So it's funny how that all comes full circle.
If they want to.
Oh, wonderful. Okay, so here's what I'm going to do. Mike's giving me some information about the tournament and the foundation. I'm going to have all this in the show notes. I want to make sure that everybody knows how to get to you and what this is. And if you want to see, like on Facebook, you can go to @LTM or LT Lieutenant Michael Thornton. That's the Facebook. And then would you want me to give Connie's email out, because she runs the foundation?
Yeah, she runs.
Yeah, so C. Boucher. Did I pronounce that right, Mike?
No, Connie Boucher.
Boucher. See, that's an East Texan trying to pronounce a French accent. Connie Boucher, but C. Boucher at themetfund.org, or you can call them at 214-720-0696. And I'm going to have this information in the show notes so that if y'all want to get involved with the Met Fund, I think it's obviously, you've heard that it's a great cause led by great people. And last thing, there's a movie being made.
There's on the book. I'm working with Sylvester Stallone and Mel Gibson right now, and
I mean, you couldn't find anybody bigger. I mean, golly.
Somebody said, "Who's going to play your part?" I said, "I don't care."
Well, again,
it ain't going to be Stallone. I know.
23 years old, man. I don't think so. Wow, that's so cool.
Yeah, they're looking. We got writers and stuff, and Mr. Stallone and Sly and I have been talking this whole time. My wife and I have been in Costa Rica, and we finally got everything. The dots. I's dotted and the T's crossed and all the other stuff, and so we're moving forward.
Well, that's one of the things that's pretty cool, Mike, as you told the story. I mean, I grew up watching the Rambo movies, Chuck Norris, Uncommon Valor, all these, Platoon. You lived it. I mean, I watched movies, and you mentioned movies earlier that inspired you. You lived it, and that's what's so remarkable. And and to be able to sit across the desk from you and hear the story in real time, that the actions that you've taken to protect our freedoms and to defend this country. First and foremost, I can't thank you again for defending our freedoms, but also taking this time to come on the Texas Titans podcast, because if there's anyone now, look, I know you're a South Carolina boy, but you're in Texas now, brother. So it's
going to take a Claymore mine to blow my ass out of here.
That's what I'm talking. That's what I'm talking about. So you are, in every sense of the word, a Texas Titan, and unless there's anything else you need to deliver, man, I just want
to thank everybody out there, and ladies and gentlemen, and young kids, and everybody listening to this podcast. Don't take this great country for granted. The great country we live in has been written in blood, and don't forget about the ones that are on the walls and everywhere else. I don't think this great country just on Veterans Day. I think it every day of my life, and I thank God that I'm part of this. And so take this opportunity in life to, as you can heard, my life wasn't a bowl of cherries. It was hard work for, and that's what I tell everybody. Take this chance, this opportunity, and better your life and help people as you go along the way.
Amen. Very well said. Mike, thank you so much, sir.
My honor, shipmate.
All right. Hey, folks, I hope you enjoyed this episode of the Texas Titans podcast. Before you go, I wanted to let you know where you can find us out there on the interwebs. You can go to show notes as well as listen to all the past episodes and look for upcoming shows at textitans.blog. Also, that has all the different formats that you can listen to the show on if you go there. So textitans.blog. You can also go to jasonwrightnow.com. That has not only a link to the podcast, but it also has a link to my Make Your Own Rules blog that I think you'll enjoy. So please check that out. Also, it has information about my executive coaching business, speaking, and anything else like that. So jasonwrightnow.com. jasonwrightnow.com. That's literally just my name, jasonwrightnow.com. On Twitter, I'm at jasonwrightTX. I would really appreciate a follow. I have not been a big Twitter user, so I need you guys to help me with that. So please take the time to go out to jasonwrightTX, find me, and follow me. I'm trying to get more active with it. And so if you'll engage with me, I'll try to do a better job of engaging with you. So I would appreciate that. And then on Instagram, I'd really appreciate a follow there. I'm at Jason Wright Now. Again, my name now. So please follow me on Instagram. And then on Facebook, I'm also at Jason Wright TX. So check us out there. And I'm also on LinkedIn, so look for me there. I try to use as many platforms as possible to let you know about upcoming shows, past shows, and then also just anything that I find interesting. I'm trying to push it out and get better with the social media. So please check us out there and follow us. I would be most grateful. And also, please do not forget, it means the world to me for you to go to iTunes, give us a rating. Right now, we've got that 5-star rating. I'm hoping to hold that. Please, please, please. The comments that people are writing are so very kind. Thank you so much. It means the world to me. And that's how we keep moving up in the ranks. And right now, we're crushing it with downloads. The show has really had incredible feedback thanks to you guys. So I'm grateful. Please keep that momentum going by giving us a review on iTunes. Thanks so much and have a great day. And as always, I could not be more grateful for you listening. Thanks.